what this is going to do, if the United States pushes this, is that it's going to, as I said, launch itself into an economic war with China. It is also, more importantly, going to hasten even further the withdrawal of more and more countries from the dollar. Because what Besant is saying is that any country that trades with Iran is going to be thrown out of the dollar system. Some countries are going to have to trade with Iran. Pakistan, the Central Asian states, have to trade to a greater or lesser extent with Iran. So they are going to presumably be thrown out of the dollar if Besant has his way, which obliges them then to turn to the payment systems, the alternative payment systems that the Russians worked very hard to put together in 2024 for BRICS, and which there has been glacial progress with since.
大家好，这里是华人视角频道。刚才这段精彩集锦，表面上是在讨论美国对伊朗发动所谓的经济切儿行动，爱实际上揭开的却是华盛顿越来越熟悉的一套逻辑：只要不听美国指挥，就要接受制裁；只要继续和伊朗做生意，就可能被踢出美元体系。听起来像是在围堵对手，结果却可能是在亲手加速去美元化，把更多国家推向替代性支付体系。更耐人寻味的是，贝森特把经济战说得像一场精心设计的军事行动，仿佛只要把油门踩到底，就能同时击垮伊朗，中国还能继续巩固美国霸权。问题是，现实不是交易员的走势图，更不是靠几个响亮的行动名称就能操控的棋局。制裁越是无差别，反弹就越可能越大，威胁越是全面，越会逼出更紧密的合作。接下来正片将继续分析中国为什么不可能接受美国替他决定对外贸易，又会如何应对这场被强行推到面前的经济战争。美国究竟是在削弱对手，还是在削弱美元体系本身？我们接着往下看。
We're talking here about secondary sanctions.
Yeah.
Besant is saying there's going to be no leakage, no loopholes. We're going to strangle Iran. And if this means we have to go after countries that are helping Iran, so be it. And everyone is taking this to mean China.
Yes.
Your thoughts?
Well, it does mean China, because, of course, China, as we've discussed in many programs, is the key to any successful sanctions policy against Iran. And what the Americans want to do is that they want the Chinese to enforce American sanctions against Iran. The Chinese have said repeatedly that they will not do that. So what Besant is proposing is a return to a full-fledged economic war between China and the United States. Now, we've been there already. We've had this happen on 2 occasions last year when tariffs went up to levels that were so punitive that effectively trade between the United States and China all but collapsed. The Chinese retaliated to those tariffs by imposing a stop on exports of rare earths. Since then, the problems with rare earths have got worse. The Chinese, as a matter of fundamental principle to their foreign policy, have made it repeatedly clear that they are not willing, that they're not going to ever agree to a situation where the United States controls their foreign trade. They will support sanctions which have been lawfully passed by the UN Security Council, on which China has a presence, it's a permanent member, and has a veto. But all other sanctions that the United States unilaterally imposes are considered by China to be illegal, and China, for that reason, will not accept them. Now, we discussed some weeks ago that the Chinese government has already made known to Chinese refiners that they should no longer worry about secondary sanctions when sourcing oil. If the United States comes for them, China will back them. what this is going to do, if the United States pushes this, is that it's going to, as I said, launch itself into an economic war with China. It is also, more importantly, going to hasten even further the withdrawal of more and more countries from the dollar. Because what Besant is saying is that any country that trades with Iran is going to be thrown out of the dollar system. Some countries are going to have to trade with Iran. Pakistan, the Central Asian states, have to trade to a greater or lesser extent with Iran. So they are going to presumably be thrown out of the dollar if Besant has his way, which obliges them then to turn to the payment systems, the alternative payment systems that the Russians worked very hard to put together in 2024 for BRICS, and which there has been glacial progress with since. The Americans, if they do these things, are finally going to turbocharge that progress, because exactly as happened with the freezing of the Russian assets, this is going to confirm to more and more people that you cannot rely on the Western financial system and on the dollar.
It's interesting that Trump has put Besant now in charge of Iran. I mean, he is now, Besant is the general fighting this war against Iran. That's the impression that I got when I listened to Besant's statement yesterday. You're either with America or you're with Iran, he said. Remember Bush? You're either with us or you're against us.
Yes.
He started talking about secondary sanctions and no leakage. He talked about D-Day, and if you're the U.S.'s friend, then you're going to reap the benefits of being a U.S. Friend. If you're against us, well, then you're going to be cut off from everything. It was quite an astonishing statement, a move from the Trump administration to put this guy, the Treasury Secretary, effectively in charge of the war against Iran. And Besant was asked a question by a reporter about D-Day and the secondary sanctions on China and everything you pretty much outlined, and the effects that it's going to have on the global economy, the very bad and negative effects it's going to have on the global economy once Besant starts to implement this with us or against us, no leakage, no loopholes type of policy, secondary sanctions. And Besant said, I'm not looking to blow up the economic system, right? I'm not looking to wreck the economic system, something along those lines. And when he said that, I just thought, he's looking to blow up the economic system. Is that the game here? I'm going to put my foot on the accelerator and I'm going to crash everything. And I believe, as Besant, I believe that the U.S. is going to be able to survive this chaos. Other countries, not so much, but we're going to survive this crash.
Yes, I think that is probably exactly what he thinks. After all, that is his background. I mean, a lot has been said about him being a currency trader in the past, and of his various the sort of work that he did in the past. I think that is his background. That is what he thinks. He has the massive overconfidence that, well, you could see in him all the time. In terms of China, I've heard it from people who actually know him that he has a visceral dislike of China, and that he is one of these people who generally does believe that China is a house of cards, that he's internalized this view. I've even heard a story that at one point, roughly 10 years ago, when people were trying to explain to him that China is a lot more solid than he believed, he just wouldn't listen. I mean, he was one of those, he's probably got these ideas that China is really very fragile. It will crumble very fast, and he will be the person who will bring it down. And we will all look to the great Scott Besant, who, as a result, when the military failed, because this economic war is an admission, first and foremost, and we shouldn't forget this, of military and intelligence failure with Iran. When the military failed and the intelligence agencies failed, when everything looked lost, Scott Bessent, financial wizard, came, used all the great instruments and weapons that the United States has in terms of how to manage things, and he was the person who brought down Iran and brought down China too, and secured Western hegemony and American hegemony ultimately. So I think this is really what he believes, and I think he does generally believe this. The Chinese, I think, feel that the Iranians treat them very much as second best, that to the extent that there are people in Iran who want to see the economy, who want to prioritize the economy, they have an overwhelming Western orientation. We see this again with Pezeshkian, President Pezeshkian, who ought to be going to China as the man in overall charge of the Iranian economy. He ought to be going to China every week, because that's where Iran's economic salvation lies. He has made a recent speech in which he's talked about, let's end the war now, we're in a position of strength, let's basically go back to the MOU, let's see whether we can do some deal with the Americans and ultimately with the Europeans, because we need to prioritize the economy. And the implication is, the assumption is, that it is only the Americans and the Europeans who really matter here. So the Chinese don't like that. They did a big economic agreement with Iran some years ago, in which was going to involve massive Chinese investment in Iran. It never materialized because the Iranians preferred to deal with the West, and the Chinese were angry. So if the United States were wise, it could use this tension that already exists between China and Iran to its advantage. But of course it's not doing that because it is not wise.
回看今天的内容，最值得警惕的，并不只是美国准备加码对伊朗施压，而是这套经济切尔行动背后所展现出的政策逻辑，把金融、贸易、结算和市场准入统统变成地缘博弈中的武器。它所针对的表面目标是伊朗，真正要测试的却是美国能否继续凭借美元体系。对其他国家的对外贸易划出红线，所谓次级制裁，最强硬的地方就在于它不只惩罚被制裁对象，还要惩罚所有与被制裁对象发生正常经贸往来的第三方。换句话说，美国要求的并不只是盟友配合，而是要求全世界接受一个前提：只要美国不同意，其他国家就不该做这笔生意。这已经不是传统意义上的制裁，而是一种对全球经济选择权的重新定义。问题在于，国际贸易从来不是一句站队就能切断的。伊朗连接着中东、中亚、南亚和欧亚大陆多条运输、能源与商品流通线路，许多国家同伊朗交易，并非出于意识形态，也未必是在挑战美国，而是因为地理位置、能源需求、民生供应和边境经济决定了他们很难彻底脱离这种联系。越是把制裁范围无限扩大，越会让更多原本不愿选边的国家被迫思考一个问题：如果有一天自己也成为目标，手里还有没有替代方案？这正是美元体系面临的深层矛盾。美元的影响力来自市场规模、金融深度、制度惯性和长期信任，而不仅仅来自惩罚能力。制裁当然可以在短期内制造巨大压力，但如果使用的过于频繁、过于全面、过于带有非我即敌的色彩，它也会促使各国加快建设绕开美元的结算渠道、储备结构和贸易网络，替代体系未必成熟，推进也未必迅速。可一旦越来越多国家都觉得必须预留后路，这种趋势本身就会改变全球金融秩序。而中国在这一轮博弈中的位置尤其关键，中国未必希望中东航道受阻，也未必愿意为伊朗承担无限成本。稳定的能源供应、畅通的海商贸易和可预期的外部环境，显然更符合中国的经济利益。中伊之间也并非没有分歧，更不存在天然、无条件、毫无保留的绑定关系。但国际政治往往有一个规律，当外部压力不断升级，原本存在分歧的各方也可能因为共同面对威胁而靠得更近。 美国如果试图通过次级制裁迫使中国接受其单边规则，得到的未必是中国退让，更可能是中国、俄罗斯、伊朗以及周边国家在支付、能源、物流、资源和区域贸易上加速合作。原本可以通过谈判分化的问题，最后可能被强硬手段重新整合成更大的对手阵营。这也是为什么经济战从来不像一些人设想的那样可以精准打击，毫发无伤。关税会传导到商品价格，供应链重组会推高企业成本，金融限制会增加交易摩擦，航运受阻会影响能源和原材料，最后每一层成本都会沿着市场传递，落到普通消费者、工人、农民和中小企业身上。政策制定者谈的是战略威慑，市场感受到的是订单减少、物价上涨、不确定性加剧。再看美国与加拿大之间的贸易摩擦，这个信号同样值得重视。面对外部竞争，美国一方面试图强化对伊朗和中国的经济压力，另一方面却与高度融合的邻国发生新的贸易争端。这样的局面会让世界看到，美国不仅在外部面临复杂挑战，内部供应链和传统伙伴关系也并非牢不可破。一个国家越是把经贸关系工具化，越容易让合作伙伴开始重新评估风险。当然，国际关系从来不是谁喊得更强硬，谁就一定能够获胜。真正决定长期格局的是工业能力、科技实力、能源安全、市场容量、社会韧性，以及能否向其他国家提供稳定、可信和有吸引力的合作条件。靠施压可以赢得一时，靠规则和互信才能维持长久。把世界简单划分为朋友与敌人，或许能制造动员效果，却很难解决一个高度相互依赖时代的真实问题。今天这场围绕伊朗的经济围剿，最终检验的或许不是谁能被先逼到墙角，而是谁更能承受脱钩。分裂与重组带来的代价，越是在这样的时刻，越要看清一个现实：全球经济不是棋盘上的几个棋子，每一次制裁、每一道关税、每一次金融封锁，背后都牵动着无数普通人的生活。你怎么看这场不断升级的经济博弈？美国的次级制裁会巩固美元体系，还是反而加速替代体系的发展？欢迎在评论区留下你的判断，也请点赞订阅，看更多精彩视频。